The distress signal pulsed through the void, a desperate cry from a dying world. It wasn't just any distress call, it was ancient, encoded in a long-forgotten human encryption method, and it originated from deep within a war-ravaged sector of the galaxy. The Galactic Coalition, a fragile alliance of numerous species, had long abandoned the region. No known civilization should have been there. And yet the signal persisted. Captain Yelith of the Vorthani Dominion frowned at the holographic projection floating above her console. Her species had conquered dozens of worlds, and this sector had been left as nothing but scorched rock and drifting debris after their last great war. There was nothing left alive here, so what, by the void, was calling for help? "This is a trap," her first officer hissed, his mandibles clicking anxiously. "No world in this sector has functioning technology. No survivors. It must be scavengers. Pirates." Yelith wasn't convinced. The signal wasn't haphazard. It followed a strict pattern, repetitive, insistent. It was too structured to be random noise or pirate trickery. "Prepare for a tactical approach," she commanded. "Let's see what kind of fool still believes in hope out here." Her fleet dropped out of warp, sleek warships casting long shadows over the burning husk of a planet. Scanners roamed the blackness, searching for the source of the distress call. And then they found it. A ship. Not just any ship. A human warship. It was ancient, at least by galactic standards, but unmistakably Terran. Its hull bore the deep scars of battle, massive gouges where energy weapons had burned through armor. Yet somehow, impossibly, it remained functional. It drifted like a sleeping beast, silent and ominous. Its once proud insignia was nearly erased by time, but one word still stood clear on its hull. Valkyrie. Yelith's blood ran cold. Humanity had been gone for centuries. They were a legend, whispered about in the dark, the apex predators of a long-extinct era. The last of them had vanished after the Great Purge, wiped out when the Coalition had deemed them too dangerous to exist. And yet, here was a human warship broadcasting a distress call. A warning klaxon screamed across the bridge. Weapon system activation detected. Impossible. Yelith snapped, but then she saw it, power surging through the Valkyrie's ancient frame, lighting up dormant engines, charging weapon banks that should have been dead eons ago. And then the transmission changed. A voice, rough, unmistakably human, growled through the comms. "You answered the call. Bad decision." The battlefield erupted. The Valkyrie's thrusters roared to life, and in an instant, it was upon them. What should have been a relic of the past moved like a predator. Its railgun spat fire, tearing through the unprepared Vorthani fleet like a blade through flesh. Yelith barely had time to scream an order before the first ship in her formation exploded in a burst of molten metal. A single shot. A direct hit. This is impossible," her officer stammered. "That ship is from a dead species." "Then why is it killing us?" Yelith snarled. But deep in her gut, she already knew the answer. Humanity had never been truly defeated. They had waited. Hidden. And now, with a single distress call, they had lured their enemies in. Because humans didn't beg for help. They called for war. The battlefield was chaos. The Valkyrie moved like a phantom through the wreckage, its railguns tearing through Vorthani hulls like brittle glass. Plasma lanced toward it, but the ship danced through the onslaught, twisting in ways that should have been impossible for such an ancient vessel. On the bridge of her flagship, Captain Yelith gripped the console, her mandibles locked in shock and rage. "How is that thing still alive?" she growled. "It should have disintegrated centuries ago." Her weapons officer's claws fumbled across the control panel. "It's not just functional, Captain. It's adapting. Its targeting is learning." Yelith's stomach churned. She had read the ancient war reports. Humanity's ships weren't just machines. They were beasts designed to evolve mid-battle. The Valkyrie had been watching them, analyzing their formation, their weapon patterns. And now it was striking where it hurt the most. Another explosion ripped through her fleet. A cruiser, the Thranvier, tried to turn away, but the Valkyrie had anticipated the maneuver. A railgun round lanced straight through its engines, setting off a cataclysmic chain reaction. The ship folded inward, breaking apart in a silent, fiery scream. Yelith's first officer staggered forward. "Orders, Captain?" Orders? What orders could she give? They had entered this sector expecting wreckage, ghosts, a false alarm. Instead, they had found a nightmare that refused to die. But Yelith was Vorthani. She would not run. "All ships, full bombardment." She bellowed. "Target the engines. If we can't destroy it, we'll cripple it." The fleet responded instantly. A dozen ships opened fire at once. High-energy disruptors and antimatter torpedoes raced toward the ancient warship, an inescapable net of destruction. For a moment, Yeleth felt a flicker of triumph. Even a Deathworlder ship couldn't withstand this. And then, the Valkyrie vanished. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Where did it? A shadow fell over her bridge. The Valkyrie had repositioned itself behind her flagship. It had baited them. No. A searing blast of kinetic force ripped through her ship's shields like they were nothing. The bridge shuddered violently as alarms screamed. Consoles erupted in showers of sparks. The view screen flickered, replaced by a face. A human face. He was old, his scarred skin a testament to battles fought long before Yeleth had hatched. His eyes, however, were the worst part, not full of anger or hatred but of cold, calculating amusement. Still think answering an SOS was a good idea? The human said, voice gravelly with age. Yeleth felt a surge of terror unlike anything she had ever known. Because this wasn't just a distress call. It was a trap. And the humans had just begun hunting. Yeleth's mind reeled, her mandibles trembling as she watched the human's expression on the flickering view screen. The trap. They had walked straight into it. The distress call, the wreckage, the seemingly abandoned warship. It had all been bait. And now the Valkyrie was behind her flagship, its ancient weapons charged, its intent unmistakable. The human on the screen tilted his head, his scarred face barely illuminated by the dim glow of his bridge. You know, he said, his voice eerily calm, most people who answer a distress call come to help. You came with your guns out. Yeleth snarled. She refused to cower. You're a relic of a dead race, she spat. This ship, you shouldn't even exist. The human smirked, a slow, knowing expression that sent an unnatural chill through Yeleth's exoskeleton. And yet here we are. Without warning, the Valkyrie opened fire. A railgun round screamed through the void, colliding with the Vorthani flagship's rear stabilizers. Metal screamed. The force sent the entire vessel into a sudden, uncontrollable spin. Impact. One of Yeleth's officers shrieked. Structural damage, engines destabilizing. Counterfire, she roared. Hit them with everything we have. The flagship's broadside batteries unleashed a relentless barrage of plasma bolts and antimatter torpedoes. The Valkyrie twisted and rolled through space with inhuman precision, dodging shots that should have been unavoidable. Yeleth's claws dug into her console. Was toying with them. Target its core. She bellowed. We may not destroy it, but we can cripple its weapons. The Vorthani fleet regrouped, their formations tightening, their fire converging. Ships surrounded the Valkyrie, energy discharges hammering against its shields. The sheer force should have overwhelmed it, should have left it burning in the void. But instead the Valkyrie moved faster. One moment it was trapped in the crossfire. The next it disappeared. Yeleth gasped. Where? Above us. A shadow fell over her bridge. The Valkyrie was directly above them, its guns already charged. Yeleth's breath froze. The view screen flickered. The human was still there, watching her, his scarred face set in something that wasn't quite amusement, but wasn't quite anger either. Here's the thing about Deathworlders, he murmured. We don't just survive. The Valkyrie's main railgun fired. We adapt. The flagship's shields collapsed. A gaping, burning hole tore through its side. And for the first time in her life, Yeleth felt true, unshakable fear. Yeleth's vision blurred as the shockwave tore through her flagship. Sirens screamed, emergency lights flickered, and the acrid scent of burning circuitry filled the air. Hull breach. Decks 20 through 24 are gone. An officer shrieked. Yeleth's claws dug into the command console. This couldn't be happening. The Vorthani Dominion had crushed empires, raised death worlds, broken unbreakable species. And now they were losing. Not to an armada. Not to a superweapon. To one human ship. On the view screen, the Valkyrie drifted through the wreckage of her fleet, undamaged, untouched. The human's voice crackled through the failing comms. I could finish you right now. Yeleth's mandibles trembled, fury warring with terror. Then do it. The human's scarred face twisted into something unreadable. No. For a moment, silence. Then he leaned forward. His next words landed like a blade between her ribs. I want you to remember this. Yeleth's breath hitched. You came here thinking you were gods, the human continued, voice quiet, dangerous. That you could conquer, burn, take. That no one would stop you. Because that's what always happens, doesn't it? He let the silence hang. But now you know, he said, there's something worse than death worlds. The Valkyrie's cannons charged again. Yelith braced for the killing blow. But it never came. Instead, the Valkyrie turned away. It drifted through the wreckage, weaving between the broken remains of the Vorthani fleet, ignoring them, letting them live. What? She rasped. The human's gaze bored into her. Because this is the only warning you get. Then the comms went silent. Yelith slumped forward, her exoskeleton trembling. The Valkyrie wasn't just a ship. It was a message. And the Dominion had just received it. The humans weren't dead. They had just been waiting. And now the galaxy would never be the same. Yelith's limbs trembled as silence settled over the shattered remnants of the Dominion fleet. Officers slumped in their seats, staring wide-eyed at the comm screen, unable to process what had just happened. They had faced death before. They had crushed rebellions, burned colonies, wiped civilizations from existence. But this was something worse. The Valkyrie hadn't just defeated them. It hadn't just won. It had let them live. And that single act, that mercy, was more terrifying than annihilation. Yelith forced herself to straighten, though every fiber of her being screamed that she should be fleeing. "Commander." An officer's voice was shaky. What do we do?" Yelith opened her mandibles to respond, only to realize she didn't have an answer. Retreat? Go back to the Dominion Council and tell them that the unstoppable armada had been humiliated by a single human ship? Surrender? Bow to creatures they had once considered primitives? Or worse, prepare for what was coming? Because something was coming. The humans had sent a message today. A warning. One ship had done this. One. How many more were out there? How long had they been watching? Waiting? The thought chilled Yelith to her very core. A transmission cut through the silence, static crackling. It wasn't from the Valkyrie. It wasn't even from the Dominion's forces. It was coming from beyond the battlefield. "This is the Valkyrie Trade Alliance. We have witnessed the battle. To the Vorthani Dominion, your era of unchecked conquest ends today." Another voice followed. "This is the Zelthari Coalition. We have long feared retaliation from your war fleets, but we now see your forces are vulnerable. The balance of power has shifted." A dozen more messages flooded in from species across the sector. All watching. All waiting. And now they saw the truth. The Dominion was no longer untouchable. The humans had broken the illusion. Yelith's mind raced. If the other species rose against them now, the Dominion would be torn apart. Their fleet had been their greatest weapon, their iron grip over the galaxy. And today that fleet had been shattered. By one ship. The galaxy had changed. Forever. As the Valkyrie's engines flared one last time, vanishing into the void, Yelith whispered a truth that sent ice through her veins. "The Deathworlders are here.